So it was about 9 years ago we started 23andMe, and it was really with that idea of making personalized medicine a reality. And my background was from the Wall Street days, where I was really frustrated with the fact that very few people were actually taking what I saw as a technology that would enable personalized medicine and make it a reality. And so there was all kinds, again, from the drug industry, I think they do all kinds of wonderful things, but there was definitely this sense that we didn't necessarily want to introduce personalized medicine yet, and that it wasn't going to happen as fast. And there was this great paper that was written in 2000, and between 2000 and 2005, I kept expecting all this stuff would happen, and then nothing really was happening. And one of my inspirations from the Wall Street days was actually the HIV community. And for those of you who remember this, it was a really angry time where people came together and there was ACT UP, and the patients sort of galvanized, and they all came together and they really changed HIV treatments. And they're the ones who brought together tons of financing and funding, and the patients actually showed that they actually could understand this information and they can make a difference. And so 23andMe was really born with this idea of how do we actually mimic some of what was happening with the HIV community, and how do we actually bring together individuals, all of us, with this idea that we are the ones that actually can bring forward personalized medicine, that we're the ones that can actually start to understand what drugs actually work for which patients, that we can think about personalized prevention, that we are the ones who collectively can come together and that we can actually make a difference. So the mission of 23andMe is to help people access, understand, and benefit from the human genome. When we think about access is a really important thing for me, where we don't want to actually create the bottleneck for you have to go through a physician, it's be really expensive, you have to go through your insurance. Instead, we try to make it really simple. So in the UK, it's 125 pounds. You just order this kit, or now you can actually go to Superdrug. You can actually just get it, you spit in the tube, you send it back through the mail. So enabling people to access this in a low-cost, cheap way has been really critical for the company. We did recently just launch at Superdrug, so you can go actually even to the one over in Oxford, and you can see there's a display where you can actually buy your 23andMe kit right there. So one of the other components was to actually make sure that you can understand it. And if we just give you your raw data back, it's not very useful, but we want you to enable you to understand it. And we believe that you're quite capable of understanding it. So we've recently been working, we were taken off the market, or we were prohibited from giving back health information from the FDA in 2013. And we recently just got the ability to actually go back and remarket some of our tests. And you can see from the FDA, part of what they said is that the results were actually easy to follow and understand. So there's always this question out there, can the average consumer understand their genetic information? And we are arguing yes, that they can, and now have this statement, at least from the FDA. We did show that we had over 90% comprehension from our consumers about what they're understanding with their DNA. This is a paper from Robert Greene where he actually shows not only are people understanding it, but they're actually wanting then they're wanting to make a difference. So they're taking this information and then they're saying, I actually want to change my life. I actually want to go and make a difference. And they're going to their physicians and asking, what is it that I can do? And I think one of the more important points in medicine is when you, the individual, comes to your doctor and says, it's that aha moment, I actually want to change my behavior. What can I do? And I think that's part of something that we can actually all start to understand better and start to learn more about, is if you walk into your doctor's office and say, I want to prevent multiple sclerosis, is there something that you can actually do? For things like type 2 diabetes, obviously there's something that you can do. You can start to change your diet, your exercise habits. So how is it that we can actually encourage more that individuals are actually changing their behaviors? So a little bit about what we give back. We give back 43 inherited common conditions, so things like cystic fibrosis. 43 reports on that. We have 12 drug response reports, so anything from like hepatitis C response to warfarin sensitivity, and 11 genetic risk factors, so Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, et cetera. So these are two of my favorite stories that we have. So this is a guy named Jeremy, where he actually wrote in, and he sent this picture where he's on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. And he wrote back saying, a year ago I was actually in the hospital because I just assumed I was one of those old 41-year-olds where I just couldn't actually really exercise, and I had collapsed, and I just assumed I was going to be one of those people that's really old at 41. And his sister then got tested, and it turns out she was a carrier for cystic fibrosis. And lo and behold, it turned out that he actually had a mild form of cystic fibrosis that had never been tested, despite the fact that he'd seen lots of pulmonologists. As soon as he started being treated, he was actually able then to sort of return to his career in hiking, and that's why the picture from Mount Kilimanjaro was so significant to him. This guy is actually one of my favorites, Dr. Z. Dr. Z is a comedian in Las Vegas who got his DNA. I saw him actually in another talk, and he gave this whole comedian speech about us. So I'm talking, he's like, look, I got my results back, and suddenly I see I'm massively high risk for a blood clot. And he's like, and I had no idea. Here I am, I'm a physician, and my father's a physician. And so I called my dad, and I said, what did grandpa die of? And he's like, oh, this thing in my lungs. And then what did your uncle die of? He's like, oh, something in the leg. And he's like, everyone in my family has died of blood clots. And nobody was aware of it. And here we are, all physicians, but nobody actually was aware of it. Nobody put the 2 and 2. And so I think one of the important things about the genetics is it's just giving people insights into themselves that might sometimes actually be missed. It's not going to replace everything in medicine, but it's a really important additional clue. So knowledge is power. It's one of the things that we get asked all the time. Why do you want some of this information? And again, we feel like it's a really important personal choice for individuals. If they want to get this information, it's their choice. Angelina Jolie, I think now is sort of one of the main spokespeople, or well known now at least, for demonstrating sort of some of the potential of what you can do when you get your genetic information. This is a quote taken from her second op-ed that just came out, and she ended on that phrase, knowledge is power. And I think more and more we're getting into the stage where consumers want this information, and that knowledge is powerful for them to be able to make their own choices. So I'm going to focus then on the last part, which is the benefit of the human genome, which actually really factors into this idea of the big data. When we started the company, it was really about empowering us, the consumers, to learn all about ourselves, but then also in aggregate make new discoveries that are going to benefit all of us. And so one of the things that really always bothered me from the Wall Street days was just how horribly ineffective drug development is. And I say the pharma industry is the only industry I know where they actively market and lobby about how ineffective or how inefficient it becomes every single year. And so if you look at, 10 years ago, it was only $1.5 billion, and now it's $2.5 billion. So it's the only industry, and I think about this, and it's a crisis for all of us if it's just going to keep going up this way, because we all are inevitably going to have something, and we want to be able to enable the pharma and the biotech industry to be much more productive with the dollars they are spending. There's over $50 billion a year going into this. So how is it that we can actually help decrease this number in the future rather than actually seeing this hit sort of the $3-4 billion number? So one of the main problems is that 9 out of 10 drugs are failing in clinical trials. And one of the things that people came to me and they said, one of the best things that you can do is actually decrease this number. Instead of 9 out of 10 drugs failing, get it to 5 out of 10. That would actually have such an impact on pharma. And so why is it everything is failing? And so this is my favorite slide. Partly we're quite genetically similar to a mouse, but clearly we're quite different as well. So while most studies are actually hypotheses coming from mice studies, it's potentially much more valuable to actually start with the human. And this idea that humans are really just the experiments of nature. That if we have all this genetic similarity and we can actually start to see why is it that some people develop Alzheimer's, some people don't. Some people are genetically high risk and they get it, and some people are genetically high risk and they don't get it. So why? And what is it that we can learn with that? And so if we look at, we're all 99.5% the same, but clearly there's massive variability. So how is it that we can actually all learn from each other? And this was the real foundation of 23andMe. If I have the world's information about all of us, and I can really understand human variability, how can we actually apply that to our health and that drug discovery in a much more effective way? So PCSK9, I think, is an example many of you probably know. So the experiments in a family that was found, or multiple families that were found, where they found that they either had really high LDL levels or really low LDL levels. And what they found is the loss of function leads to a decrease in LDL, gain of function, and increase in LDL. And so it's a great example of how you can look at a family or individuals that have sort of these really rare phenotypes and then understand the genetics. And now that genetics is being applied to all kinds of drug therapies. So there's now over 5 companies working on PCSK9 as an LDL therapy. So because of this, we have so much data and we wanted to do more in the drug discovery. We launched 23andMe Therapeutics. Richard Scheller, who was the head of R&D at Genentech, recently joined the company with this idea that we have so much data. If you're going to go anywhere in the world, you're going to go to 23andMe because we have so much data. And starting with the human is the best way of potentially trying to reinvent the drug industry. So how do we actually do that? We start with 23andMe, all of our customers signing up. We have your genetic information, and then we ask you questions about yourself. So we ask you all kinds of different survey questions, things like cancer, family history, to more fun things like how many wisdom teeth you've had. We've been doing this actually for a number of years. In 2009, we actually launched 23andWe, which was our phenotype collection platform. So we now have years and years of phenotype data longitudinally that we have been collecting on individuals. So we now have over 250 million research questions that have been answered. Over 900,000 people in the 23andMe community, so by far the largest database in the world of genetic information. And over 80% of our customers have opted into research. So at any time, any of our customers have the ability to opt in or to opt out of research. One of the things that's really unique about what we do is that we enable individuals to be recontacted. So if there's another question, if you're a 23andMe customer and there's another question or you become interesting for a certain phenotype or certain genotype, we have the ability to email to our customers. So this is an example where an academic researcher came to us and said, I'd seen people who have the GBA mutation, which is 1 in 1,000. I'd seen people who have the LRRK2 mutation, which is 1 in 10,000, but I'd never seen people who have both mutations. So does 23andMe have any of those individuals? So it actually turned out that we had 17 of those individuals in our community, and we wanted to contact them. So we contacted them, and within 36 hours, 8 people agreed to a punch biopsy. And so if you think about how this potentially transforms research, where historically, if you wanted to try to find these people, it's essentially impossible to find them in any systematic way in your general practice. But by having a huge number of individual people who are put together, who are in this community of research, then it's super easy to actually recontact them. So we've been doing it. We have over 30 publications. This is one that's recently come out on Parkinson's disease, another one on motion sickness. So we don't have a specific focus on a phenotype. We actually just ask questions about everything that's, something like coriander to Parkinson's disease, so things that are of human interest as well as specific to diseases. We have all kinds of individuals. This is just sort of a quick snapshot of the types of diseases that we have. 11,000 people with Parkinson's disease. And if you look at the number of confirmed controls, that's one of the areas where it's just outstanding how many people we have for the controls. Over 162,000 ApoE4 carriers. Over 1,600 people with colorectal cancer. And again, just want to emphasize, part of what's so interesting here is the fact that there's all these other people who do not have the disease who are also in the same community. And that becomes really valuable with this idea of actually trying to find some of these escapers. And this is a paper that actually came out from the University of Birmingham, which is really interesting. A woman showed up and she had a severe reaction to radiotherapy. And it turned out that she actually has the mutations. That means she should have actually had ataxia telangiectasia. And so it's really interesting because one of our good friends, Brad Margus, he actually has 4 children, 2 of them who have this disease. And Brad has been, he was the founder actually of Perligen back in the early days of genetics. His 2 sons have this disease. And suddenly, he's inspired because there's this woman all the way in the UK who has the same mutations as his sons, but she doesn't have the disease. So what is it that he can learn about this woman that is going to help him with any kind of treatments potentially for his sons? So it's super exciting. It's part of the power of actually having this huge community of individuals is that you actually might have something magical within you that helps someone on the other side of the world. And you're never going to get to that kind of information unless you actually have a huge database of information. So it's one of the last points I'll end on is just that your DNA actually does make a difference. We're one of those few places in the world where instead of actually contributing dollars or contributing other information, like your data and information about you actually does help change the world in terms of all of these health and the prevention discoveries that we can make. Thank you.